Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Ghost and Spirits video. I thought I would mix one of these in and make it of the week. While I was finishing and wrapping up the Mysteries and Oddities videos, I went ahead and I picked a suggestion, one of the first ones from the first series of suggestion videos in my Ghost and Spirits video. So way back when, in other words, is in terms of how far I went back to pick this suggestion. It's been suggested several times, and it actually has to do with a location rather than a particular spirit. It is considered to be, or was, or maybe still is, the most haunted house in England. Has that very distinct notion because ever since it was built a good number of years back, it has experienced a large number of hauntings. Multiple tenants, multiple people moving in and out, each one of them stating that there was a huge amount of paranormal activity, and it was investigated by a very controversial ghost hunter from his time. And even then, his claims to this day are either considered solid fact or they're considered, let's say, false, like almost fake news, if you will, with regards to this home. So lots of controversy associated to this place. It's called the Borley Rectory, which you're looking at a picture of here. So let's go ahead and let's start this information with regards to this home. So what was the Borley Rectory? And I mentioned was because it turns out it actually ended up burning down a little bit later. More on that too, because apparently it has to do with yet another haunting. Well, it was a home that was built way back when. You'd have to go back into the 1800s, 1862 to be specific. It was built there in a place called Borley. The city, in other words, is called Borley, or it's known as a parish of Borley, there in Essex, England. And it was built essentially as a Victorian home to house, I guess, any tenants that either were prominent status or had some kind of funds available to them to be able to live here. It looks like it was a beautiful home. I mean, it was, in essence, your average large mansion. There was probably two floors, two main floors, the attic, and then most likely a basement as well. Could easily house a large family of sorts and then have those people live there for a long time. Of course, as the story goes with the Borley Rectory and the hauntings tied to it, it has had many, many occupants, and I'll talk about those here. But the legend goes as to why this place is haunted. It seemed like sometime within the past, a couple of centuries ago, none of this is of course verified, but it was looked up by one of the first tenants of the home itself, a Reverend Henry Bull, who lived there with his, no kidding, 14 children and a small staff. They immediately began experiencing some kind of hauntings within the rectory. They experienced ghostly footsteps. They experienced whispered voices. This, of course, intrigued the Reverend because he was, in his religious nature, wanting to see what was going on. He did a little bit of research, and that's when he came up with some local lore. Apparently, somewhere in that area, the way the legend goes, centuries ago, there was a monk from a monastery and then a nun who decided to fall in love with each other. Of course, by their very nature, they could not do so, but there they were, probably doing it in secret, probably planning to elope, probably having an affair as well, who knows. And that eventually, though, they were found out, they were intercepted, and their punishment was very severe. Again, because of their particular lifestyles, the lifestyle that they chose, it was considered the most harshest cardinal sin, and in that case, the monk was thereby executed, and the nun was probably in a worse situation when you think about it, because she was placed into a room, boarded up, essentially bricked up, walled up, whatever is the case, and then left there to die alive. Like, in other words, however long it took her to die, she just died within that small room. Pretty nasty way to go. But the legend goes that these two spirits, after they ended up dying, met still within that area and can then continue to haunt that location, shaking out their wrath, in other words, on anyone that happens to be living there. So that was, in essence, the first, I guess you could call it, peek into the lore tied to the Borley Rectory. Sure enough, though, this Reverend Henry Bull and his massive family, they decided to leave afterward because they started to see other things too. They saw a nun peering through the windows. Sometimes she would actually appear on the grounds as well, vanish right out to thin air. They in turn also saw the monk as well. He seemed to be either on some kind of coach, being led by a horse as well, or it seemed like they were being followed by the nun as well. Interesting to note, though, is that in the earlier stages, they were not harmful per se, like they were not bothering these family members, but still, it was too much for them, and so they decided to leave. Cut to about 1928, there was yet another reverend, a guy by the name of Guy Smith, who decided to move into the Borley Rectory. He lived there with his wife, and then that's when they in turn saw not only those ghosts, but they would hear other things as well. They would hear these bells ringing when nothing was around, and then also within the home itself, there were those bells, I guess, to announce certain things happening. Like I remember seeing that within the Thistle home there in Fort Worth, how there were these bells that you could ring, and it would ring various parts of the homes to alert either staff or crew to something being needed. While those bells within the Borley Rectory were going off on their own, there were also these strange lights found within the windows, so every time somebody was looking from outside, clearly though when nobody was inside. And then finally the wife of the Reverend, Mrs. Smith, that she saw an actual human skull deep within one of the cupboards of the rectory, having no idea, of course, how it came there, but there it was afterward. So, with regards to that information, they decided to try to bring in an expert of some sort. It was this guy who you're looking at, Harry Price. This guy is still to this day pretty controversial because it seems like his stance was that if it moves, if it makes a noise, if it does or whatever, it's a ghost. I don't know if like he tried to be a skeptic, or if he did, maybe he didn't do a hard enough job, but still, he in turn came into that location and he was able to document, and again this is kind of loose because there's so much controversy surrounding him, but he was able to document so much stuff associated with this home. He saw, for example, poltergeist activity. He saw stuff being thrown clearly across the room. He's heard rappings against the wall, probably intelligent rappings, the kind where you can ask it yes no questions based on the number of wrappings towards the wall. But he eventually left, stating that he was not able to come up to any conclusion as to what was happening. But still, that's when the Smiths yet again moved, and they decided to get out of that location. Cut to 2 years later, I'm sorry, 1 year later, 1929, and another reverend, it seems like a lot of priests seem to love this place, by the name of Lionel Foyster, and his wife, Marion, brought along their daughter, and they moved in there too. That's when things escalated to an unbelievable level, because it seems like whatever was haunting this Borley Rectory in turn started to fixate on Marion, which is quite common when you hear ghost stories. It seems like these ghosts love to play on teenagers, people that are young age, maybe even preteens. Something about them going through puberty, something about them being at such a sensitive age that these ghosts seem to have very nice, I guess, easy access to them, and that way they can play on their fears. Either way, though, they started making sure that Marion was getting all the attention. There were these messages, clearly intelligent messages left on the walls stating for Marion to please help them get out. There was something else involving mass prayers. There were also windows that were being shattered. That was a huge escalation right there, because imagine that could be pretty dangerous. You could be right next to one of those windows, and then that's it. I mean, it's shattered and it's going straight towards you. There was also stones that would be thrown at anyone within the rectory. That could be considered the harshest thing possible yet, because there was, in this case, especially large amounts of stones, you could have serious damage associated with it. Of course, the Foysters decided to leave, cut to about 1937. And then the home itself, it must have gained enough, I guess, let's say, infamy at that point, that they did not have another tenant for quite some time. So Guess who returned? Harry Price, the most controversial, I guess, ghost hunter of his time, decided to return. He rented it for a full year, and when he did so, he brought in 48 people to take their turns staying within the home and then trying to gather as much information as possible. They were able to gather some stuff too. It seems like everything that I mentioned earlier was happening as well. They even conducted a seance, and then a ghost of a man apparently appeared and threatened to burn the rectory down during that seance. It was almost like a premonition of what was going to happen in the future. So he stayed there for the entire year. He left. It seems like there was no one else within the home. But cut to 1939, and whatever that ghost was that gave that premonition, they were true to their word, because apparently an oil lamp within the rectory, presumably empty, like in other words nobody was there, or maybe somebody was there just maintaining it carefully, not living there necessarily, but just maintaining it, it spilled over. So this oil lamp mysteriously fell over, and when it did so, completely damaged the building, burned it down. You're looking at some of the pictures of it here. By that point, when the fire was going in its full glory, witnesses that were seeing this fire, maybe trying to stop it or just seeing it go down because there was nothing else they could do, they reportedly saw these ghostly faces in the windows. That's kind of creepy. When I was reading that information, they saw these ghostly faces by the windows as the fire burned. And then finally that was it. Whenever the home was almost ashes, this guy Harry Price came back, tried to check and see, now that he had more access to it, if he could find more investigatory evidence. And sure enough, he found some bones buried deep within the home, presumably by one of the ghosts or related to one of the ghosts. And so he gave the bones a proper burial within a local cemetery. And cut to a few years later, the rectory, having never been rebuilt, was just completely demolished. And this was done in 1944. So no word yet. I don't think anything else has been built on top of that. Somebody please correct me if that's something that you know more information on. Like, let's say something else has been built otherwise, but it seems like that place now is just 100% by itself. So now, as far as the controversy again tied to this rectory, there was a group that came about and decided to investigate not just the home but also Harry Price himself. This was a group that consisted, I guess, of paranormal investigators. They were known as the Society for Psychical Research Investigation. And SPR, in other words, is how they know. And they decided to investigate all these claims related to the Borley, and they were in turn presenting something that almost shook all the previous reports, because according to them, all the stuff that I mentioned earlier could either be A, faked, or B, be considered due to natural causes. In the cases of things being faked, it has to do with the idea that, remember the Foysters that I was mentioning earlier, the Marion Forster as well, she was apparently having an affair of some sort, like she was, I guess, leaving with someone or whatever is the case. And when that happened, she explained it as hauntings, like she was creating this phenomenon, faking it, in other words, to try to make sure that he was whatever was happening, that there was, I guess, cover-ups related to her affair. So she was the one stating that there was these ghostly noises. She was the one that apparently played jokes on people. And in those cases, it was all to make sure that, yes, it was because she in turn was having some kind of affair. So interesting stuff. There's also the idea that with regards to being natural causes, that in their investigation, I don't know what they did, but they were able to presume this: the rats and other animals that were living within the home could have caused a lot of those noises. Maybe stuff being shattered, stuff being knocked over, steps, whispers, sounds, whatever is the case. It seems like they in turn pointed to the large rectory of having all these animals just living in the woodworks, living within the walls, who knows? And then they pointed to that as being the actual stuff. And then finally, they just stated that sometimes it's people creating jokes, like people knowing that they have some sort of power over creating these things and maybe creating attention, trying to get people to notice them. Who knows, whatever the case was, but they concluded that a lot of other situations it was just people faking things, like people saying that they saw something, but in turn they really didn't because there was no true evidence tied to it. But yeah, there was a lot of damning evidence, a lot of accusations from this group, especially towards that controversial guy Price. So to this day, this home, this Borley Rectory, if it was truly haunted or if it wasn't truly haunted, then it seems to be more along the lines of let's say a controversy, split down the middle between people as to what the true nature of it is. Even the bones. Remember, I was mentioning earlier that the guy Price found and that gave the proper burial. There's even disputes there that those weren't the bones of a young woman as presumed, but instead are those of a pig. But again, it's more sensational to try to state that it was of a person. That way, it truly leads to it being the idea that there was ghosts or some kind of hauntings because of the improper burial. So even then, that's another example of all this stuff, this controversy tied to the Borley Rectory. But yes, if anyone has any more info, anything else that I might have missed, something else important, please post those comments. Anyone been to that area? Maybe know someone that did. I would be surprised if Ghost Adventures have not done a trip there. Someone point that out to me if they have or haven't. That would be good to hear too. So, all right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care.